That's the good stuff.
Welcome back, everybody, to Goodwill Podcasting with Connor, Dan, and Stone, your movie podcast that today is talking about vampires. We're talking about Count Orlok. We're talking about Dracula, Mr. D. We're talking about Nosferatu. That's right. Robert Eggers' new adaptation of the classic Gothic tale is out in theaters now. We have all been looking forward to it tremendously. We have seen it. We are here to talk about it. And we knew that we were going to talk about this for such a long time, and we knew who our guest was going to be. I don't want to spoil it just yet if you're listening, but we're going to talk about most of the adaptations of this story. I think these are all the main adaptations of this story today, but we're going to talk about 5 movies altogether. One's not kind of an adaptation, but Nosferatu, 1922, 1979 as well, Nosferatu the Vampyre, Bram Stoker's Dracula from Francis Ford Coppola, Shadow of the Vampire, which should be really fun, and then also Robert Eggers, one that just came out in theaters. But our guest today is none other than Harry Marks. Let's all go to the lobby. One of the best, sorry my French, fucking people on the app of TikTok, anywhere talking about movies, I swear. If you have not checked out we're talking about Nosferatu, so if you're interested in this discussion today, go check out his review. I watched it 4 times last night. 4 times. Before we got on, I was talking about your verbiage and the dinner plate and, helpings, appetizer, whatever you did at the very end. Just magical. Harry, welcome to Goodwill Podcasting.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry I'm not going to be able to live up to that introduction, but I appreciate it nonetheless.
I was inspired by you. I have a teleprompter right here that I was reading off of. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah. No, I've got mine in the corner over here. Yeah.
I had an interesting prompt for you guys. So we watched a lot of Nosferatu, we watched a lot of Dracula, a lot of Ellen, and we got obviously Count Orlok, all these characters. I wanted to ask you, out of all these adaptations, which character in which movie is your favorite? So which Orlok is your favorite out of all of them? Which the characters' names changed a little bit. So what lead female character is your favorite? Lead husband? I know they do change a little bit. Because I know in Nosferatu the Vampire, he's actually referred to as Dracula in that, not Count Orlok, I believe. So I don't know, Dan. You want to start out? Like I know who your Count Orlok is. I'm almost positive.
Yeah, I don't want to. I mean, that might take a while, but I definitely just would say Willem Dafoe's Orlok is my favorite. I think I just enjoyed what he was doing the most, and I think getting to see him in that made the new movie a little bit more special. I think just having that tie to it, and I just kind of enjoyed what he was doing. I thought it was a very funny movie, which I guess we'll talk about. But he was my favorite Orlok, I think.
All right, let's go, Harry. Harry, what is your favorite female lead out of any of these movies?
Favorite female lead? It's hard to choose because I didn't love Nosferatu the Vampire, the Herzog film, but I did love Lucy, and it threw me for a bit because Mina is technically, if they're going to do Dracula, Mina is the fiance, and Lucy is the friend, but they gave the main female lead Lucy as a name. But her agency and her desire to bring this all to an end, I think, surpassed even the new Nosferatu, the Lily Rose Depp character. So it would have to be her for me. I think she was given like full agency in that film versus any of the other adaptations or films. So.
I agree. Connor, what about Renfield? Who's your favorite Renfield?
I think it's funny you brought that question up to me because I was watching this. All of these were first-time watches for me, and Renfield to me kind of felt like if Gollum was still a hobbit, but like acted like Gollum. That's how Renfield felt to me in all of these movies. But that one I'm probably going to say the one from Bram Stoker's.
Really?
He was just cracking me up the whole time.
Oh, the Tom Waits?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I gotta say, Nosferatu the Vampire, their Renfield was giving me strong Peter Lorre vibes. Like, had that been made 10, 15 years prior, that would have been Peter Lorre in the role.
He was my favorite. I really liked him a lot. he was like the most that movie was really serious, and I feel like he was the most cartoonish character in it, which I guess that's kind of the Renfield role, is just to be crazy, but I feel like he just went a step above.
Yeah.
I mean, we got to ask ourselves why we aren't talking about Renfield from last year when Nick Cage is Dan's favorite actor.
That was such a disappointment to me. Such a waste. Like, such a wasted opportunity to do something so fun, and just you have Cage as Dracula, and it was bad. Very bad.
What's that? I guess I'll give my favorite male lead, which I got to go with the original Hutter or Hutter. I was trying to look up the German pronunciation of it. I don't know if that was right or not, but I'm gonna try to pronounce his name. Let's see here. Gustav von Wagenheim.
Wangenheim, yeah.
Okay, look at me. Dan Real takes over here. My pronunciation. I can't pronounce that word right. Anyways,
should watch my intro. I did it. I pronounced it.
Oh man. But hey, let's get into that film, shall we? The original Nosferatu. It's kind of funny because I always like to, pitch movies because we always choose our own movie to talk about. But this one, it was kind of understood which movies we were going to discuss on the episode. And we really don't have to discuss the plots either, which basically all the same besides Shadow the Vampire. So I will say this is my first time watching this movie, and this is my first time watching a silent film. And I'm excited because this was way more entertaining than you have those like factors of a film. I feel like, especially if you've never, watched one before, you have some hesitations. I will say I love how fast this movie is. It's probably the shortest movie we're discussing today besides Shadow of the Vampire. I think they're right around 85, 87 minutes kind of mark. This movie flies by, and I have to say, it's my second favorite of the bunch. I watched one more right before we jumped on the episode today. But yeah, I will say this was very entertaining. Like I said, it's got my favorite Hutter in it. I think the female performance is great. I really like the story. They do changes in every single one of these films. And this is my favorite because it really is just about Hutter being a very terrible husband. And I think that's really simple, and it really fits with the runtime of the film, being how all the consequences that happen to his wife is because of him and his being naive and not really listening to her, which is a constant, message in all of these movies is nobody listens to the woman really. But like I said, it flew by for me. Visually, it's really engaging. Like, it's really entertaining. It didn't really, I know it was, very rooted in German expressionism and everything when it comes to, displaying art in a certain way. But this was just not horror in my eyes. It was just very, I know the way it was made was, but it was just very entertaining. Like, it just flew by. I watched this at work. I always watch all my movies at work. And luckily I was able to sit there the entire time because it wasn't a busy night. And I was very happy about it. So
you better pray your boss never checks out our episodes.
Not a chance. I met my boss one time in the last 4 months. Not a chance. And it was because I got in trouble for something. And afterwards, which was a dumb reason. And afterwards, she's like, by the way, how's it going, Stone? I was like, pretty good. Thanks. Nice to talk to you. Anyway, she will check out this, but.
Harry, something I wanted to get your opinion on was, what's kind of your take on the origins of this and how it kind of came about and the lawsuit and all of that? Because I think it's important to talk about, and I'm curious to get your take on it.
Yeah, so I mean, to set the stage, Murnau had wanted to adapt Dracula, couldn't get the rights, so he loosely adapts it. He changes names, he changes settings. He moves it from, I think, 1880s, 1890s London to 1830s Germany. He changes Dracula to Orlok, Jonathan Harker to Thomas Hutter, all these names. And he combines the Renfield character into Herr Knock, who is the head of the real estate agency who sets everything into motion and sends Hutter to Transylvania to get the deed signed for this property. What ends up happening?
He tried to clear it first and they said no, the state, right?
I believe so. I think
Yeah.
that's what happened, and so he does this sort of fan fiction film version of it, and according to the story, Florence Stoker, Bram Stoker's widow, receives, after the film is done and it's released, she receives a package in the mail, and it's a poster or a program for the film, and emblazoned across it are the words "freely or loosely adapted from Bram Stoker's Dracula," which sets into motion a lawsuit to try and get the film pulled out of theaters, of distribution, of everything. They wanted it incinerated,
Yeah.
and the judge agreed. The judge said, "Get rid of it," and by the time everything had come to a head, by the time the judge agreed and brought the gavel down, the film had made its way, both across Europe and overseas to America, which is the only reason we still have it today. So there were prints circulating around. I believe it was decades before anyone actually saw it ever again, because it had to be restored. It was tinted, it was dyed over the next several decades. I believe the original was a pretty stark black and white film, but if you watch it today, you'll see the cut I watched, which is on Momitu, and I have an intro for it as well there. It's the certain scenes are dyed certain colors. So, for example, when it's night, it's dyed blue. When it's sunny and daytime, it's dyed yellow, to give the viewer sort of an idea of what time of day things are happening in, and how to feel, basically. But that's the story, and I think it adds to the mystery of this film. This film's over 100 years old. We weren't there when it was made. Everyone who's made it or who was involved in the making of it is dead. And because it was considered a lost film for so long, there's this mystery surrounding it, and I think we'll talk more about that when we get to Shadow of the Vampire. But it's just, there's this whole lore and mythology around the original Nosferatu that cannot be shaken, and I think that's why there was so much what's going to happen with Eggers' version? How is it going to stack up? Because Nosferatu isn't just this film, but it's the lore and mythology surrounding it.
Yeah. I think it's interesting in Orlok. I mean, in Nosferatu himself, I think that's where he kind of really crafted the primary difference, obviously, and was able to create something that was more so his own. Because really, Orlok has very little to do with Dracula outside of being a vampire. But I think so much of Dracula is really in his kind of, I mean, he obviously has a human appearance, and he's kind of more about mystery and sensuality, and he's kind of an attractive figure generally. And this is literally, Orlok could not be further from that, and he's kind of just this completely warped, really evil sort of version of that. But I think we see very different takes on it from movie to movie. But I believe, and it's also interesting because Orlok isn't turning people to vampires; he's just killing them.
Right.
And he's also, I think he's supposed to be essentially kind of a demon. He was created by sort of this Hebrew devil kind of entity. He was just kind of spawned. He wasn't a normal vampire. So I feel like there are a lot of differences, but it is interesting, I think, to think about the origins and just kind of the plagiarism aspect of it.
I mean, he Murnau made a number of changes. The look of the character differs greatly from the original text. In the text, he's tall, thin, lanky. He has a mustache, not as bushy and
Bill?
Vlad the Impaler inspired as Eggers' version. I think that's where Eggers was really going here. Is this is a 500-year-old vampire from the early days of Russia, and he's survived all this time. Whereas Murnau's version is, some scholars have said it's anti-Semitic in nature. Murnau was not, by what we know about him, not anti-Semitic. He protected a lot of Jews in the years leading up to World War II. He was a gay man himself, and I think having that, being a minority in the world at that time, and having to hide who he is, I think contributed a lot to what he felt. I think any depictions that were considered anti-Semitic were accidental in terms of Orlok. So, take it for what you will. There are some people who interpret it as being completely anti-Semitic. And look, you're talking about Germany. When the film was made, Germany is in the years leading up to World War II. Mentalities are changing. We're starting to see the otherness or the othering of the Jewish people in these years. And so this idea that this plague comes to Europe looking this certain way, which has come to define a lot of caricatures of Jewish people at the time, I think has contributed to that notoriety.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that too, because I think what you see in the movie that's interesting with Orlok is Orlok's kind of synonymous with the plague and with rats and like bringing just death
Right.
with him. And I think what's interesting is, I mean, rats were like the scapegoat, right, for the plague. Everyone said, "Oh, it's the rats." People were spreading the plague. Fleas were on people. Like rats were a secondary spreader of it. But it's easy to say, "Oh, it's the rats' fault," right? And then you can exterminate the rats. You can just get rid of them. You can put all your, fear of everything into the rats. And I think when you look at like really any kind of verbiage around people, but especially in Germany leading up to World War II, a lot of the ways that the Jews were talked about and other people that were just deemed as other were vermin, rats, like that was
Right.
all the time. And I think, again, it's easy to just take all your problems and put them into whatever you can demonize. So I think it is interesting, and who knows if there was like subconscious bias there. I think a lot of people associated with the film fought in World War I for Germany. I think Murnau himself, I believe, was in the German army. I mean, obviously that was a different war. It was a different driving force behind it. But the anti-Semitism in Germany was not just, it didn't just appear in 1940.
No,
so.
it was fermenting for a long time. And it's I think it's also the rats were not bats. Like in the novel, we don't see bats until Herzog's version. I mean, we see bats in Dracula and 31 and everything, but in terms of Nosferatu, we don't see a bat appear until Herzog's version. And I think that's the only one we ever see. Even Eggers's version doesn't have bats in it. Rats almost seemed like a way to get around the copyright even more, making it easier for him to say, well, their book has bats and mine has rats, and we're two different things.
Yeah, bats are just flying rats, though. So.
Rats are very smart. I was a rat owner for 10 years, and they are very smart, loving creatures. They're like tiny dogs.
Yeah, I have no rat hate. But, I mean, I think it's something people associate with.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
like a negative thing, so it's easy to be like, ooh, rats. Like,
no, they're great chefs, too.
Don't get me started on that.
Stone, are you with me right now? I just want to kind of let those two, the historians, take this from here.
Well, yeah, I've been silently just sitting here hating myself because I just went on a ramble about like, oh, I almost got fired from work and all this stuff. And Dan's like, okay, here's the thing. We have Harry on, and Harry knows more shit about this than anybody. So Stone, that was nice, but just let him talk. And I appreciate that, Dan. I've been sitting here thinking about my I've been sitting here thinking about my decisions. So.
Absolutely.
I mean, Harry's just showed me different ways that I can be better myself.
Yeah.
Said absolutely.
You guys need to shut up, please.
I think this movie, like, this wasn't intended, obviously. I think it's really funny. Like, I think a lot of things like really kind of set me, which again, I don't think was the intention, but it's, there are some moments that are really funny. Like, even like when he wakes up and he has like the puncture wounds in his neck, and he's like writing to Ellen.
Mosquito bite. Yeah, the mosquito
Yeah,
bite.
he's like, mosquitoes got me. It's like, dude, what are you talking about?
Those pesky Transylvanian mosquitoes.
Yeah, but he really is a moron in this, right? Like you talked about. Like he really is not very likable, and he's not a good husband. And I think.
And I love that. I love how I know that's a simple story, but I think it really fits with the time perfectly. Like you can't do what Eggers did. You can't do what Coppola did. Even Herzog. You can't tell as much stories that he wants to tell in a silent film. You really can't. So I love the amount of that they told in this. The story that they told is perfect for the technology they had at the time.
Yeah, I think the crux of the story is kind of represented in the beginning when he brings her flowers, and it's clear that she doesn't like flowers. She didn't want them. And he's just like, oh, I did a good job. I'm the husband, so I brought the flowers. And it's like, well, do you even know what she likes and doesn't like? And I think the driving force of the story, him going on this journey to make something of himself and be successful for her, but in reality, probably just for himself and his own ego, is not something she would rather he's just home with her, like hanging out most likely and being safe. But he's doing something that he's presenting as, for her or them, and it's not what she wants at all. So I think
It's that
it's
classic,
interesting.
macho. I'm the man. I have to provide. I need to go out and do what I'm expected to do, even though she's telling me not to do it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and again, it's she's a woman. She has, she's saying what she wants, and then he's saying, I don't care.
Now,
I also
Harry,
want
I would say you might have to tell me if I'm wrong. This is my favorite part of this movie, and hopefully I'm not wrong on this because like this is the only time I've watched it. But one thing that this movie does that every other one changed is I don't believe the female lead, so Ellen in this case, I don't believe she gets into these dreamlike states until the locket is placed in front of
Hmm.
Orlok. That is different, and Herzog's and obviously Eggers as well. And I like that because especially with watching this film back then, if this was such a new story that you just weren't expecting, now if people had read the novel, maybe it would have been a little bit different. But I think that it's like a little bit of mystery because she's constantly like walking around saying like I need you, come to me, stuff like that. And the exact same time, Orlok and Hutter are on their way back. So you don't necessarily know who she's calling out for. Is she calling out for her husband or is she under Orlok's spell? And
Right.
I really like that because obviously you know what's happening in the other versions, but not necessarily maybe this one.
Yeah, I agree, and that I like the idea that connection is established when he takes hold of the locket, as opposed to Eggers's version where she's calling out for any kind of companionship, any kind of love, any kind of connection, and this being appears and latches onto her, almost like she awakens him from the grave. It's an interesting dichotomy. Herzog's version, as much as I didn't love the film, I love his visuals, but for me, it was anachronistic. There was a lot of modernism in that film, like modern door locks, um, you know, throughout the film. It took me right out of it, and the music choice was also very modern. A lot of the background music and stuff. But the loneliness of his Orlok, of Klaus Kinski's Orlok, really struck me there. Like he was looking for he says there's that line, there are fates worse than death, there are things worse than death, and living alone in this castle, basically, with no companionship, no love. Even though he doesn't convert anyone into vampires, it's the same plot. He's feeding. He's still looking for that connection. And that struck me as well. And she also has the visions right from the beginning. She has these vivid dreams of something
Yeah.
wrong happening. So yeah, it's interesting how they establish the connection between Ellen and Orlok, or Lucy and Dracula, throughout each of these. But I almost do like the Locket version better because it's a clear, like almost like he's passing it on. Like he takes the locket and now she's mine.
Harry, do you know? I want to talk a little bit about like the reaction at the time. I know this was banned in Sweden until the 70s because people thought it was like too extreme, which is kind of wild. But um, I mean, at the time, were people like horrified? Was this like what was kind of the general energy around it or reaction that you're aware of?
Um, I mean, look, even though film itself was not a new medium, I mean, it had been around for, 30 years or so. I think, in Germany, especially, what we were seeing were these explorations into the occult, the macabre. You had Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. And so audiences were frightened. It's this movie was heavily advertised. It was everywhere it could be in Germany when it released. And I think there were people who really liked it. It didn't really hit in America. I don't think it had the chance to hit in America, and it was lost for a long time. And then it was pulled out of the market almost immediately. So, it didn't really have a chance to build a following. And then, over the years, it builds up this lore and this mythology and this what happened to it? Why did it go away? And I think that contributed to a lot of the fascination with it.
It's just wild to think about the fact that how different times are, just us mentally, like what we've seen and like how desensitized we've become. So, because I think obviously Dan's like, how was it received? Because he found parts of this funny. And it's not like we found it really horrifying
And
at all, just because of like what we've seen. Like this is probably maybe one of the first horror films that anybody had ever seen back then, and especially.
and a
Or
lot
go ahead.
I'm sorry to say a lot of the criticism at the time was similar to what we're seeing with Nosferatu today, which is it's visually stunning and everything, but it's also the design of the creature is a little funny. Some people said it was too well lit to be scary. The way we see Nosferatu, the way we're introduced to him, first comes up in the carriage. He's obscured mostly by his cassock and everything, and then he just sort of is like standing in the doorway, and there's very little build up to him, and so I don't. While some people found him scary, other critics really just thought it was kind of silly, and more about vibes than anything.
Is that rather than it being scary? Then is that the reason why it's had such a big impact? Is because of the way it was made and like the filmmaking techniques that it used?
Yeah, I mean, look, it was shot on
Yeah.
location. A lot of films at the time were not shot on location. Sets were built. If you look at Caligari, all of those sets were artificial. But they filmed in, I want to say, Czechoslovakia. They filmed in real castles. They filmed in real locations for authenticity. And I think that contributed a lot to why it was so well liked. It felt authentic and real, as opposed to a lot of other German expressionist films at the time.
I think also I wanted to ask you quickly. This was kind of the highlight of Max Schreck's career, right? I know in Shadow of the Vampire,
Yeah.
they talk about him training with Stanislavski. That's not real, I don't think. Like I understand what they were trying to do, like say there, but I don't think that was actually real. But I was kind of trying to see, and it doesn't seem like Max like this was definitely the highlight of his career. But it's an amazing performance, and I think it's my favorite thing about the movie. Um, but I just wanted to kind of touch on that briefly. But I think the Stanislavski thing was kind of fabricated, as far as I can tell.
I think, yeah, the Stanislavski thing was shoehorned in there. Not shoehorned in there, but I think it was there to justify why he was method,
Yeah,
why he went full Leto on all of this.
Still funny.
And he because I feel like the Stanislavski method didn't really come into play until much later. With even like post Laurence Olivier, there's that famous interaction between him and Dustin Hoffman on the set of Marathon Man, where Hoffman is trying to get into character and like really trying to get into the scene, and he's trying to go full method, and Olivier says to him, "My dear boy, have you tried acting?"
Yeah.
I think Stanislavski didn't really get big until much later, but I understand why they did that, because they needed to establish a way for Defoe's character to just be full method and give you that idea of like, is he a vampire? Is he not a vampire?
Maybe just a really like 2-minute tangent here. I was just talking about. I think it's interesting we're talking about that because Stanislavski, I think he died like right before World War II, but a lot of his disciples, I think, were the people that ended up kind of creating a lot of the actors that would dominate in the 50s and 60s, etc. And I made that video about Jimmy Stewart. Is there a general term for that sort of like 40s style of acting and the kind of exaggerated theatricality and the pronunciation that was necessary like before like the Brandos and people like that came into play?
I think it's just called classical style. I
Yeah.
think you've got method and you've got classical, which is acting, especially as you look at the films of the early 30s when they're coming out of talkies and, people are trying to adapt to this new idea of sound on film.
Yeah.
A lot of the motions and the emotions and the deliveries of lines are over the top in a lot of these films because they're still trying to figure out. In fact, Singing in the Rain is all about that. Trying to adapt from the old ways into the new ways, and who didn't get to make it because they didn't know how to fit into this new paradigm.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. Just thinking about all that and the way acting has changed over the years. But you know, every era kind of has its merits and great actors. So it's cool to see.
So, because this was my first silent film, Harry, what would you recommend to me next? Would you recommend The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari?
Absolutely.
Or
That's
okay,
that's a must watch. Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Honestly, if you want like really good German expressionist adjacent film, go watch Night of the Hunter. That is along the same lines. There's a lot of framing and cinematography in that reminiscent of Caligari. I did a video on that a couple months ago. Metropolis is another great one.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean the chestnuts are fantastic. I'd also watch like The Man Who Laughs with Conrad Veidt. Also very good, right? Conrad Veidt. I think I was every once in a while I'll blank on Conrad Veidt and Claude Rains. But yeah, go watch those.
Inspiration for the Joker.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah, this guy's
Yeah, that
scary
was-
as hell.
Who did that? That was I think that was Conrad Veidt. Yep.
Yeah, that guy's scary as hell. Sorry.
Yeah,
I can see the inspiration.
Yeah, exactly. He was clearly the inspiration for the Joker.
Yeah.
So I have to. So what do you guys have this rated on Letterboxd? I know I have it at. I believe I have 4.5. I believe there is some editing. I think it's just of the times. There is some editing to me in this that doesn't necessarily make sense, and that might just be of the times, which I could give it a pass, but I just chose not to.
Yeah, I mean, I just rate on enjoyment, so I rated it 3 stars. But something I more so respect than like actually enjoy necessarily.
I gave it 4, mostly for it moves at a pretty good clip. It's a little disjointed in pacing. You know, once he like tries to get back to Germany from Transylvania, it's like, and suddenly Thomas appeared. Like it's very weird in
Yeah.
that regard. But there's so much history, and there's so much you know, just there's so much backstory there. It's hard to give it anything less than 4 for me.
It's funny watching these other, iterations. I see flaws in this one, like plot holes, like the whole fact of, how did Hutter survive getting bit if he kills people? I didn't think about that, but then I think it was because I think I watched Eggers. The next was the next one I watched, and he discusses that with like the nuns or whoever helped out Nicholas Hoult. And I was like, oh shoot, that's why he didn't die. That never happened in the original. So
Right,
like,
exactly. And I like the way Herzog, spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen it, where Harker turns at the end. He becomes the next Orlok.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
So this might be a big dumb move here. Is this just called vampire in the title, or is it I want to say vampire because of the way it's spelled, but it's just vampire, right?
Nosferatu the Vampire. That's what he calls it.
I think the vampire would be kind of cool if it was, pronounced that way. But so when it came to the legal battles and legal issues with the first film, obviously, Stoker's widow had died by the time this movie was made. Do you know if there was anything like that when it came to this, or it was just like free reign, they could do whatever
Dracula
they want?
was public domain. I think Herzog
Okay.
literally made this immediately when it became public domain, and then he I think wanted to pay homage to Nosferatu, but then he uses the like Dracula, etc. But he was able to do that. Like there was nothing the estate could do because it was public domain. But it's an interesting move to kind of combine them. I wish I liked this movie more.
Same. There are certain visuals in here that are stunning.
Yes.
I found the opening with the mummified children's remains in there. Like, whoa, that set a mood. But there were just some choice of the acting. I felt it was flat. It was such a quiet film. It was like Nosferatu the Whisperer. It was just such a weird tone. It didn't, and I hate this because it's not scary. It's such a non-review and such a non-critique. But I felt like the goal here wasn't to create a horror film. It was to create a pathological understanding of someone who has lived alone for hundreds of years, which is fine. Like that's great.
It's more of like a character study of Orlok.
It is.
Yeah,
exactly. It is. And in that regard, I think he succeeded because I feel bad for him at the end of the film when he He's vanquished
Yeah.
by sunlight. I feel kind of bad for the vampire because all he was looking for was a connection, and he finds it. And the scene of him feeding on Lucy at the end, and he's copping a feel. But you get the idea that he's feeding on her the way a baby suckles at a mother's breast. Like he's looking for connection in more than just a romantic way. He's looking for a mother-child bond that he never had.
Yeah.
I wish I agree with the whole, like, this movie's silent. Like you said, I get what you're saying, like a modern score to it. Like it doesn't, like the way it sounds doesn't necessarily fit the timing of when the movie takes place. But I will say I really like the score of this movie a lot. But it, like you said, it's really good score for me, and then it's quiet for a long time.
Yeah.
And then the score kicks in again. And it's very awkward. Also, I don't know how they did the cast and crew behind all this, but it seems like a lot of these people could not speak English as well.
There were two versions of this film. So there was one they filmed in German, and then they have it in English. And there's some ADR going on with certain actors where they've dubbed over English on the German. But what's his name? The one who plays Jonathan. He was in Boys
Bruno
from
Gans.
Bruno Gans. Thank you. He's speaking English, and I think he's doing his best. But you can tell he's a native German speaker. So yeah, there were two different versions of this film, one in German and one in English.
Yeah, I was definitely at the very end. I could tell the ADR. There's like this weird discussion. I don't want to like just talk about that scene in the movie, but it was a funny scene to me. The weird discussion where there's like, we gotta throw him in prison. We don't have him. Who's gonna? There's no one left.
Take him? It's like, there's this little old guy. He's like, you expect me to do this?
It's some guy we've never seen before, and he's just like, there's no one left, dude. And it's just like at the very end of the movie, I was like, what a strange way to end the film. But okay.
It was bizarre. I appreciated Herzog, where the original Nosferatu feels like, as with a lot of early silent films, like a stage play being filmed. The camera's put in place and you're watching people act on screen. This felt very voyeuristic. Like he gets these weird angles where he's at a distance or he's up on a perch somewhere and you're watching things play out like it's a closed circuit television. And then suddenly the camera's moving with the actor. There's that scene of Jonathan running through the castle after Orlok, trying to find his crypt. And the camera's following him like we're on the chase with him. It was very interesting choice there, and I appreciated that. It was different. It felt like we were part of the action. I kind of liked that.
So the one shot that stands out to me is like that's Dracula, not Orlok, but when he's in that dark hallway and he's approaching Jonathan's room, it's very well done, and then he just appears in the doorway, which I feel like is an iconic shot. But that's the one that stuck out to me.
The scene where they're at the table signing the papers and the camera is at a low angle and like almost tucked into the corner, like we're sitting on a chair watching this all happen. I found it very interesting the way he framed all of that. I loved the scene. It was where he's in his room and Jonathan's in bed, and it is the slowest attack scene I have ever seen, where he's like creeping closer, and Jonathan's putting his arm up to shield himself. It's like, dude, just run. He's not going to chase you.
Yeah, I feel like everything about how Jonathan kind of acts in this is a little bit just strange. I don't know, but I wanted. I don't
like him.
I wanted to quickly say, I didn't say this about the original. What my second favorite thing, I guess, about the original is the music. I think the score is wonderful. I think it reminded me that you said stage play. It almost feels like a ballet where you're kind of like that's kind of how the music is driving it. Really enjoyed that. This, I think, so when I watched this, I had just watched Agira. So I think I was expecting Klaus Kinski to be like doing something more interesting here. And I think, I mean, when you look into it, like Herzog and Kinski had like different ideas of what this character should be. And Kinski wanted to do something like bigger and more energetic. But Herzog said, he would like pick a fight and argue with Kinski and get him super angry and stuff like before, and then he would have no energy left to act. So that's how he got him to like give a more reserved performance. But he didn't want, like, Kinski wanted to go big. That's what I was expecting. I think it would have been more entertaining because it's like his performance to me is kind of boring.
And it's sad because he's the most interesting part of this movie.
And the makeup is really good, but like he was in makeup for like 4 hours a day. But all that to like just kind of mope around, I don't know. It just wasn't what I was hoping it would be. And maybe that's on me, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's just he's like I agree with that, and what we've said is that what they do with our Dracula in this and his longing just to be, have companionship. It feels like they focus on the right thing, and then they just don't capitalize on it.
Yeah.
It's just a big old letdown. Like I think I read your review, Dan. It's like you're just waiting for something to happen, and it never does.
Right. And it feels like everything's happening around Orlok. Like there's that scene with when everyone's like, we've got plague and we're gonna die anyway, so we're gonna have our last supper in the middle of the town square. And it was like it felt very like Hair or Godspell, like in the middle of the city, we're gonna just act out this thing for everyone. Which I guess they came out roughly in the a couple of years span of each other. Very theatrical in its delivery. It was weird. I have to watch more Herzog. I appreciate what he's going for. I appreciate the pathos he's trying to bring to a lot of this, these characters, especially someone as iconic as Orlok. He doesn't speak in the original film. We only ever see him as being creepy and weird and a vampire. And I think he's trying to bring more humanity to this character in a way we hadn't seen before. So I appreciate that.
And it's interesting because we talked about the differences between Orlok and Dracula, and he's really like smashing the characters together, right? Like,
yeah,
he does that in name and in appearance, but he does it also in the character that he makes. So it like on paper it's interesting, but in execution, I don't think it's that interesting. But it is a good twist. I mean, having Van Helsing to play with now.
Yep.
And then having Jonathan actually turn and kind of maybe restart this cycle where he will end up as a similar lonely figure someday. I like that.
We're building a Herzog cinematic universe.
Dude, when I saw that, I was like, imagine if this is how Robert Eggers' movie ended. People would have a fit. Like Nosferatu.
Oh God. And you see the two gangly fingers with the fingernails on the poster. Yep.
That's good. That was good. I will say one scene that this movie has and that the original movie has that I was missing out on the other films that we saw. I guess just Eggers, but maybe we could have seen it in Shadow of the Vampire. But I love when he picks up his casket and he's walking. It's my favorite thing. He's just walking through town with this big old casket. It's really funny. And I sent a video to Dan and Connor, Harry. I think this movie is actually pretty funny. And the one scene in particular, that I sent to them, I think is it's when Dracula first gets into his like home for the very first time. Like he sets his casket down and he starts to walk, and all of a sudden he just sees a cross and he goes, "Ugh," and then he just keeps walking. I thought that was really good.
One thing we didn't talk about with the original, and it leads into Herzog's film and Eggers' film, is the death by sunlight, which originated with Murnau's film as a way to differentiate it from the novel. Because in the original novel,
like weakened, right?
I don't even know if he's weakened, because there's that scene in Coppola's version where he's decked out, he's youthful again, and he's decked out in the top hat and the sunglasses and everything, and he's like out on the town in the middle of the day.
It weakens his powers.
It weakens his powers, but he's able to survive. But it's Murnau who brings sunlight equals death to vampire lore, and that has carried out forever. Ever since. We see it in Buffy, we see it in, I think Twilight does that. Does Twilight do it? I don't even know. I've never seen Twilight.
They sparkle.
They sparkle. Yeah, I don't freaking know.
It shows you that they're vampires, but I don't think it kills them.
We see it in John Carpenter's Vampires, which is a film I sort of love. It's just so gory and over the top. Bordello of Blood, From Dusk Till Dawn, is a perfect example. So we see that a lot now, but that started with Murnau. That was another way to differentiate from the original text.
Harry, I wanted to ask you really quickly, before our next one, did you ever see Vampire in Venice?
I have not.
This is an unofficial sequel that was made in 1988 with Kinski and Christopher Plummer. But Kinski is playing Nosferatu again. It's an Italian film, and apparently Kinski was just absolutely bugging out on set, to the point that he got everyone to leave until he apologized. But yeah, it's allegedly a semi sequel.
Interesting.
But I had never even heard of this before.
It reminds me of when they were going to do Beetlejuice Hawaiian style up until they did Beetlejuice. I just learned that there was a version, David Lee Fisher did a remake of Nosferatu with Doug Jones.
I didn't know that.
As the vampire. I haven't seen it. He also did a remake of Cabinet of Dr. Caligari with Doug Jones. So I don't know. I've never seen these, but I'm kind of interested to see what he does.
Is Nosferatu just in the public domain, right? People can just make adaptations of it?
I want to say yes. I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, because when we were discussing it, I was like, we're talking about the five, tellings of Dracula, kind of, and I was like, well, hold on, there's a lot more. Like there's the original Dracula, I guess, but this is Bram Stoker, so we're talking about some pretty popular ones.
It entered public domain in 2019.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think I believe. I mean, we'll talk about it. I think Eggers was going to do this way earlier, like as soon as he could, but thankfully ended up waiting. But
yeah, I'm glad he got more under his belt. I think the experiences he's had doing stuff like The Northman and The Lighthouse and all that, I think he brought that here, and I think he just knocked it out of the park for me.
Yeah. Do you guys want to get into, I think, Dracula next?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because I feel like the visuals in Herzog, I don't know if, Coppola took inspiration from that at all, but it definitely, obviously, this goes way more over the top, but it was a nice appetizer for this film. I've watched this movie before, and I remember really loving it, and that's the thing is I've never read the novel, right? The book. So I expect this to be kind of like Nosferatu, right? It's an unofficial adaptation of the film, but they changed some stuff. But there's so much that's different in this movie that I'm assuming is from the book, which probably you can give me clarity on, that I think just adds so much entertainment, right? I don't think I was going to say this earlier. I don't find any of these movies scary. Maybe the most is Eggers, right? But this film, and especially the original as well, this is just a really cool, fun ride full of romance, but also like action, especially at the very end with the chase and everything like that. There's so much compacted in this movie, like everything with like the three suitors for Mina's friend and everything like that. I was like, is that from the book? Kind of. I don't know if you can give me some clarity on that, because obviously that does not appear anywhere in the other two movies that we have discussed so far.
I believe he has in the book. There's the Dracula has the harem of vampires that attack Jonathan. Like most of this film is pulled right from the text. Okay. Everyone sort of shortens all this. Even the 31 Dracula with Bela Lugosi changes almost everything about the text to provide almost a completely different narrative. They keep a lot of the characters, but the beats and everything are just completely different. I believe there were multiple suitors. I haven't read the text in so freaking long. It was like high school when I read it. I'd have to go back. But it says Bram Stoker's Dracula on the screen. This film was such a 90s film. This is what, 92? So, we're 2 years away from Interview with a Vampire. There was a string of like excessive vampire films, and by excessive I mean they were full of excess. These were lush, these were vivid, these were bright. This one really leaned into the gothic horror that the novel had. A lot of sexuality, a lot of free inhibitions, all of that in a way that previous versions didn't and couldn't do. So yeah, I love the design of this film. I mean, Coppola is an excessive director. You just look at Megalopolis. But I think it really applies here very well. I think his style works very well here because this novel is so lush and dense. what he brings to the table really brings it to life. And I think there's certain things in the novel that were, or there are certain things in the film that weren't in the novel, like the origin of Dracula, where he stabs the cross and the blood spills out over him. I don't remember that being in there, and I'm
That's
sure
really
someone will
good.
correct me if I'm wrong. But it's unfortunately it sort of gives this like there's this thing I've been noticing on comments on my review of like, well, it didn't show the origin of Nosferatu. It's like we don't always need a backstory. Sometimes we just want something to exist for the sake of exist. It's sort of like Michael Myers didn't have a huge backstory in the original Halloween. He just like one day snapped. We need to stop like spoon feeding people media and let them think for themselves and interpret things for themselves. But I think for that armor suit alone, it was worth the price of admission. So I'll allow it.
Well, that's the thing too, that it's frustrating that you said people need to be spoon fed, because it's very simple to see why that backstory wasn't explored in Egger's version. Is because both of these open up with who the movie is about, right? Eggers
Right.
is about Eggers is about Ellen, and then Coppola's is about Dracula. That's why they open up. We need backstory for the characters that matter. Like, we need to know their full story. We don't need to know Mina's backstory. She is in love with this one guy. That's all we need to know about her. We don't even know she's the lead female.
And she's also in Eggers' version, she's not praying to God. She's not praying to a specific date. She's calling out to any spiritual entity that will listen, which I think is interesting about the exploration of other religions, other spiritualism, or other spiritualities, other deities, and this is what comes out of the woodwork to latch onto her. The others didn't have that.
Yep. And I think, this movie, with what they do with Dracula, I think they tie it more to like kind of the devil and the occult, and like kind of making a deal with the devil and renouncing God and all that. So, Coppola definitely gets dramatic with it, which, again, I think like you said, I think if you're going to do this, you kind of have to do it this way, with this like big kind of campiness. I think I wanted to talk about Keanu Reeves.
I know.
It's unfortunate. I just think it wasn't the right role for him, but also at the same time, I feel like it almost adds, like, it adds something almost in a way, because it's like so bad and it's so ridiculous that it almost like fits with the movie. But I was reading a critic wrote a review and called him what did they call him? A dreary, milky nothing, a black hole of sex and drama.
And he was stunt casting. That's really what it was. He was the hot new thing. He was 2 years away from Speed. They were building him up. I feel bad because I think Keanu now could do that character justice in a way he couldn't when he was in his early to mid 20s at the time. But like, having seen him in Bill and Ted, I just kept wanting to hear like, whoa, strange things are afoot at Castle Dracula. Like, it was such a weird, the accent was off, the delivery was off. It was just it bothered me to hell.
That was one of my critiques I wanted to say, was I was not a big fan of Keanu, and I was worried Dan was going to reprimand me for that.
No, that is like the consensus of this movie.
This is a role he needed to grow into. He just hadn't gotten there yet. I think he could do it now.
But
overall, I also fan outside of franchises, but
I also think it's like Coppola bears responsibility as well. Like, if you're a director and you can't communicate what you want, or if you can't watch someone doing that and be like, hey dude, like, either get it together or he has control over the film, right? So like, I think it's like, imagine if you're, a coach and you're starting a terrible quarterback for 16 weeks and you never say, hey Timmy, let's get somebody else in, or just do something differently. You don't give any coaching. Like, it's on you. Like, you're the coach. So
there's that scene toward the beginning where he arrives at the castle and they're talking over the contract. They're talking about the contract, and you see the shadow play on the wall. Dracula's shadow like reaching out after Keanu. But watching Gary Oldman work and then watching Keanu deliver a line right after, it's like watching someone. It's like watching Van Gogh paint Starry Night and then watching someone finger paint. It's so stark in the chasm of talent there.
And it's a shame because he was coming off of Point Break and then My Own Private Idaho, which I haven't seen sadly, but is supposed to be, I think, amazing. And then he had this. But didn't end up hurting his career in the long run.
No.
I think we talked about this, but do you guys know who was the main other option to be cast for his role?
I do.
Watch it be McConaughey. Watch.
No, it was Johnny Depp.
That doesn't surprise me.
Because this is what happened: is Winona Ryder and Johnny Depp were dating.
Yep.
And Winona Ryder had a big part in this movie being made, because basically Winona Ryder was supposed to be in The Godfather Part 3. And she had to step away because she got super sick. And afterwards, she basically went to Coppola, because he's a big, powerful director in Hollywood, and just wanted to apologize. Like, sorry, I just came down with something and could it be in your movie? And I think at that moment, she showed him what she was reading, or, what she was finding interested in the movie space. And it was a script for Dracula. So without Winona Ryder, this movie wouldn't have been made, at least by Francis Ford Coppola, which is really interesting. But I think because of that, reach that she had in the beginning, Coppola was all on board for Johnny Depp being in the movie. But it was the studio who was like, who is this guy? Johnny really hadn't been in anything before that. And that's what, like Dan saying, the movies that Keanu had done, they were just like, this is the guy that we want, and they cast him instead, which I think Johnny would have been really good in this movie.
I think he would have been a better Harker than Keanu was. But then I think you would have had the, a lot of critics saying, well, it's just Edward Scissorhands all over again, or, these weird goth kids keep making these movies like Beetlejuice. It's like, I don't know. I wish they cast literally anyone other than Keanu for this role.
I was gonna say, I feel like if you put Johnny Depp in this too, this becomes like even more of a cult classic than I feel like it already is.
I'm trying to wait. So this movie came out in 1991, correct?
Two, I think.
Okay, so I guess they must have been filming it before Edward Scissorhands came out, because Edward Scissorhands came out in 1990. So I guess when they started filming, maybe that movie hadn't come out yet, so they still didn't know who Johnny Depp was.
Well, I mean, he had done, was it Barry Lyndon? I think he was in, or
I don't understand why
he was 21 Jump Street. Like, Depp was a known entity. He was
Eating Gilbert Grape.
Well, that came later though.
Before this movie. Or after.
So like in the 80s, Depp was a hot commodity because he had done 21 Jump Street for like 6 seasons. He was like, a sex idol, a sex icon, by that time.
I don't know, man. I think this Columbia.
And he's done Crybaby too, I think.
I don't know.
I will say also, this movie had so much impact, I think, like on so much other stuff. Like I think without this, like you don't get something like Crimson Peak, which I like. I think it's fun.
I love Crimson Peak.
Yeah.
Interview with a Vampire.
Yeah, I mean, I think Gary Oldman, like, it's such a fun performance. Like, I think it's just easily the best performance in the movie, and like he's just absolutely crushing it. I just posted that video last night. The Independent did their top 60 actors of 21st century, and Gary Oldman is not on that list. I think that might be the most egregious myth. Like, he's just one of the best. Like, he's one of the best, like, ever. Like,
I've heard nothing but good things about Slow Horses on Apple TV Plus, and he's a huge part of that. He's just so good.
Yeah,
Apple TV is just.
So yeah, I love his performance here. I don't love everything about this movie. I think it's a little like ridiculous for me at times. But
it's absolutely it's over the top. But like you're coming into Clinton era America. We've got a surplus. We're out of the yuppie stage. There's an excess here. People are doing well. They want luxury. They want finesse. They want they want over the top. They want that stuff. And so I think this fits in perfectly for the time period. And Stone, to your point, Apple TV Plus is some of the best series on television right now. Shrinking, Severance is my favorite show of the last 5, maybe 10 years.
I love Severance. I love Severance.
Severance is a perfect show. The first 8 minutes are up, by the way, on Apple TV Plus.
Season 2?
Season 2, yeah. Go check them out. Go check it out. Ted Lasso. I've heard good things about Silo. Like they For All Mankind, like they do really, really solid work.
Harry, have you watched Blackbird?
I have not yet. No.
I've seen Blackbird.
Okay.
Blackbird
I
was
don't watch
solid.
a lot of series, but I praise that show like very highly. And it's only
All
I
right,
think
I will
6
check it out.
episodes. So
I think the cast in this was really good. Like Anthony Hopkins
Oh, it's Van Helsing. Yeah, he's so
playing
good.
Van Helsing was great. I really liked it. I think this was directly after Silence of the Lambs as well.
Yep.
So what a 1-2 punch that was. Really cool to see him in it. And I feel like I don't know. I feel like nowadays, I guess I'm trying to think about. Well, I guess it's Willem Dafoe puts on the character. I don't know. I feel like they would cast, especially with the cast they have in this, maybe a younger actor to play Van Helsing at the time when this was made. I mean, he's the oldest person in this cast, maybe besides Gary Oldman. I just feel like Van Helsing is someone who's supposed to be like the action guy, the guy who's going to go chase down. I mean, he had the 3 other dudes with him who were like a lot younger,
Yeah, Gary Oldman was in his 30s in this, maybe late.
Okay,
20s,
it's just the
30s.
makeup. I'm thinking about
he's because
okay.
when you see him later in the movie when he's de-ageified and everything, he's young. Like he's not even middle aged. He was still. I want to say he wasn't new in his career, but he wasn't as like legendary as he is now. Now we know him as he was Dracula. He was what's his name?
Gordon.
He was Gordon, but he was also a British politician.
Churchill.
Churchill, thank you. He does these. He disappears into these roles and becomes these people. Fifth Element. He has a blast doing that. Leon is another one. He's a known entity now, and I think his performance and having Anthony Hopkins there brings a gravitas to this because Hopkins had also done The Elephant Man a couple years prior for Lynch. And so you've got these like Shakespearean actors coming on board. And I think that's why people sort of forget about Keanu because he kind of disappears halfway through the film, and he's overshadowed by the importance and the just the brilliance of these other actors.
It kind of worked out that he was cast in that role because he is kind of gone for a big majority of the movie, which kind of worked out.
Yeah.
With this might have been kind of like a breakout for Gary Oldman because, I mean, he was in JFK. He was Lee Harvey Oswald.
That's right. Yeah.
The year before, and then he was in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead 2 years before that. But before that, it's not much. So I think this really probably helped put him on the map. And then he would end up True Romance. Leon was 94. So Air Force One. 97, good movie.
Oh God, I love
Lost in
movie.
Space. Great actor. Do you guys want to get into our next movie?
I want to say this is maybe a good segue. I would say I really like this movie a whole lot. I know that you guys said it's like really pulpy, theatricals, like the Clinton example that you used, Terry. I really like all this. It is really cool. I know Coppola heads love his visuals, and I haven't watched Megalopolis, and I don't plan to, but I will say it is really cool to see just the ideas he comes up with. Like you were saying, Harry, like the stabbing the cross and blood just squirting out. It's really cool, and if he did add that beginning element to the story, the backstory with Dracula, the fact that you understand why he hates God. Because he was trying to fight for him, and this is what he gets: the love of his life dying. That's
in
really
kind of a Romeo
twist.
and Juliet way too. Like she takes her own life after she learned she hears that he had died, and she jumps out of the window, and then he comes back. He's alive after all, and finds that she's still she had taken her own life, or I think she kills herself in the room in the chamber.
Yeah.
So is this just supposed to be her reincarnated? Or is it a different woman? Because she does act like she does, Mina just fall for him? Or is this Elisabetta? Because she's like, oh yes, my love, I remember.
I think they're doppelgangers. I think they were, there's a resemblance.
He thinks she's reincarnated, but like,
yeah.
But she says that though. But is she just saying that because she's falling in love with him?
Or
she's like, I remember
by him.
Maybe okay. Maybe he's just like messing with her a little bit. Okay,
yeah.
Because he does say that stuff. So I'm like, what is going on here? But then he what does he do? He starts to bite her. Like he wants her to fall in love with him, which I think is really interesting. It's similar to like we were saying with Herzog. Like you see, there's way more to the character. Like
Right.
he doesn't want to devour her.
Well,
He wants
and
to
that
want
leads
her to want it.
into that leads into Eggers' Nosferatu and Herzog's as well. She has to willingly sacrifice herself for anything to happen.
Yeah, but I think this movie is really good. I was to say it was cool to see because obviously we're like, oh, Willem Dafoe appears in 2 of these movies, which is really sick. Also, Cary Elwes.
Yep.
I did not know that he was going to be in. I forgot that he was in this movie, and I watched Shadow of the Vampire, and I was like, he's really like smooth with it. I don't think that's a good acting term.
Look,
but,
he was Robin Hood. I mean, he's
yeah. So he's just smooth with it. But yeah, we could talk about Shadow of the Vampire because this is a. How much of this is true, Harry?
None of it's true. This all stems. So, Shadow of the Vampire is a fictional retelling of, or a fictional telling of the making of 1922's Nosferatu, and it is based on an urban legend that Max Schreck was not actually an actor. He was really a vampire, and they had actually captured a vampire on film during this movie. And this all stemmed from a couple of things. First is his last name Schreck is the German word for terror, and a lot of people at the time felt that it was too on the nose. And so there were people who felt that Max Schreck wasn't a real person at all. He was a well-known German actor under a ton of makeup, and they just made up this name for him to lend some notoriety and mystery to the making of the film. And then in the 1950s, a Greek film critic and filmmaker named Edo Kairu puts out a review of Nosferatu because it had finally come back into circulation. And he writes the line, "Who hides behind the character of Nosferatu? Maybe Nosferatu himself." And it kicked off this idea that Max Schreck was so good at playing a vampire, it's possible he really was the thing that everyone said he was. I think this is sort of a tongue-in-cheek line. I don't think it was real, but people ran with it. They ran with the idea that Max Schreck really was the undead. And so Shadow of the Vampire runs with that idea and puts Willem Dafoe in the role of Max Schreck as a potential real vampire.
And we also have Nick Cage to thank for this, Harry. Did you know that?
He's a producer. I saw him, in the credits.
And he was going to play like not Orlok, but Max Schreck in this. But it ended up being Dafoe. But that would have been something. I mean, 25 years before, almost he was Dracula. But yeah, thanks to Nick Cage for this movie, because I think the movie is really, really funny. I mean, it's a straight up comedy. It's a dark comedy.
It is. It's a black comedy, and it gets a lot of things right. I love the silent film recreations of these scenes. They knock it out of the park. I mean, they absolutely crush it. I also love the how they portray Murnau, played by John Malkovich, because he was an egomaniac. If you look at his gravestone, it is a shrine to Murnau. Max Schreck died in obscurity, and his remains, I believe he was cremated, and his remains were interred with his mother, and her grave has sort of washed away over time. It's difficult to find. It's nameless, faceless. So it's interesting to see the dichotomy here between Murnau, who was this lauded director, classic director, and Schreck, who was the true star of the film, and he just sort of died in obscurity.
I didn't realize this was a dark comedy, to be honest. There was some funny points, but I thought there was like an interesting conversation that they were trying to go for with if this guy is really like an evil vampire and like abusing these people the way he is. Like Murnau is like the same way. I thought that's kind of what they were trying to show, like the interesting, conversation between the two of them and how they're kind of taking advantage of these people in similar ways. But I don't think it matched up for me because Malkovich is just like screaming a lot. He's either screaming or like pushing drugs, which I thought was an interesting choice for his character. I was more interested in him, honestly, in Murnau than Orlok himself or Max Schreck. I don't think that was the point of the movie because I thought I already saw what I was going to, because I knew this urban legend going into it. So I was like, okay, what are they going to add to this? And it's kind of just having fun. I guess it is a comedy, but it's kind of like, hey, let's just put it in the movie and, see, maybe it was
realizing
kind of
it's a comedy. Real time.
Well, I guess that's the fun part of it. I don't know. I don't know. I thought they were maybe taking it seriously. I don't know.
It opens with him filming that opening scene in Nosferatu, and he keeps saying, like good pussy, pretty pussy of her playing with the cat, and then there's after they wrap that scene, someone asks like, how did you get the cat to behave so well? And I think someone said, oh, we gave it laudanum or whatever, and he's like, is the cat okay? And someone says, well, he did look a bit pickled. And there were a lot of funny lines throughout this film, and even at the very end, spoiler alert, they kill the vampire, and then everyone's sort of like shaken by everything that's happened, and Murnau's just like, I think we got it. It's like he's true to himself to the very end of the film. He is all about getting the shot, getting the film done, and it doesn't matter at what cost.
I think this is that we're talking about today.
Oh shoot.
My stipulation is I've not seen the 2024 Nosferatu.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I like it better than everything else as well, except for the new one. But what do you like about it?
I don't know if this is like a niche genre that I have all of a sudden fallen in love with, but something about this and Babylon from Damien Chazelle about making silent films back in the day, just I love. I want more films like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess picked up on that it was a comedy faster than Stone did, because I was cracking up from the very beginning, like Harry just said when he was talking about like who's a good pussy or whatever. I was cracking up this entire watch. And I think maybe I just connected to this one more because it was a comedy and I was just laughing, but Nosferatu is a story that I knew like nothing about come Monday. And then I just started diving into all these, which I think might have hurt me watching the 1922 version as well, just because it was silent, so you don't get as much exposition, I think. Because I was like, Stone, it's my first silent movie I've ever watched. So it's one I definitely want to go back and revisit.
I wanted to say, I think the funniest thing about this is just like it's making fun of Murnau like a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But what he kind of reminds me of here, and especially in that last scene, is it reminded me of Nope, with Michael Wincott is playing the like director, whatever he is, cinematographer. Antlers is his name in the movie, and he's like literally about to die, and he has the camera and he's trying to get the shot of the monster. I think that's hilarious, and that's kind of how I felt here in that last scene where he's literally watching like people be murdered, and he's just like, oh, this is great, like this is what we need. And he's just like a complete kind of sociopath, but Defoe is playing the monster, which I think is funny. When in reality, like he's pretty accommodating to them. Like he tries to do his thing. I mean, he is a vampire, but like he is trying to help. But Murnau is such an asshole to him that eventually he's kind of just like, screw it, like I'm gonna be a vampire. But yeah, I thought this was very, very meta and just really, really funny.
I guess it's funny.
And I love John Malkovich. And I think Cage and Malkovich had just worked together on Con Air, which I love. So I think
nice.
That's kind of probably where that casting came from. But
I think a lot of the confusion around what kind of film this was happened because of the marketing. Because when this came out, the trailers, the commercials pitched this as a horror film. It pitched this as the sordid retelling of how Nosferatu came to be, and really made Defoe out to be a true villain as opposed to like this weird animal they have found and cast in their movie and don't know what to do with or how to treat it. Also, if you're watching this on video, a friend of mine got me for Christmas a print of one of the original Nosferatu posters that's hanging on my wall.
Oh shoot!
But yeah, I think they marketed it the wrong way. I think if they pitched it as a dark comedy, people might have come to it better.
Yeah, I also think Carrie Elwes in this is really, really, really funny. I like the way he's playing that role. It's such a good cast.
Yeah,
and Eddie Izzard too is good.
Eddie Izzard really just does a great job here as Hutter and as the actor also. It's just like he looks like him in the scenes when they're filming they're refilming the silent portions and everything. I think the production design on this did a really good job.
I
Yeah.
Okay,
think
maybe I need to rewatch it.
What do you
To
mean?
be
Yeah.
honest. What do I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe it is a little bit funny. Like I forgot about the pussy line. That was funny. Didn't expect it to hear that. I just thought this was like okay, here's the thing. I thought maybe some of this stuff went on behind the scenes, like just a little bit at the beginning. So I think that's when I went into this, that's why I thought this movie was like a little bit serious. Like this is the production behind what, Nosferatu. It was really interesting. But then at the end where everyone's just getting murdered, I was like,
Yeah.
okay, hold on. How much of
Did
this
you
is
think he
like
was really a vampire?
no, I didn't think he was really a vampire. But I will say, there is one, you guys haven't talked about it, but there is one moment that I thought was really, really hilarious. I love it. Whenever I see something funny in a movie, I always record it from like my iPad and I send it to Dan and Connor. There's like this moment where Willem Dafoe's like laying down in a coffin and someone says like, we're doing this at 4, or it's 4, and he goes, 4? It's really good, just the way he pops up there. Yeah, it's funny. I will say something that's really funny too is it is funny watching him do his lines, but then also just like Defoe's just like kind of bounce. What it's not like focused on him, right? He's not the one talking or speaking, but he's just like in the background, kind of just like bouncing around, just like waiting for his like, I want the girl, give me the girl. Okay, maybe it's a pretty funny movie. I gotta admit.
I think this movie begs the question, though, in 70 years, what movie are we going to get that makes fun of a director?
Yeah, there's probably lots to choose from.
I mean, I feel like number one is going to be Tarantino.
I was just going to say Tarantino's probably going to be the big one.
I could also see Francis Ford Coppola.
Coppola, yeah. I think you're going to get a biting satire film about a Coppola movie at some point.
Yeah. Do you guys have any closing thoughts on this?
Yeah, so this is a really funny comedy. I just think everyone should check it out. Dan is not entertained. He's like, how on earth? So I'm not good at comedies.
I had to watch it on YouTube. The rights situation with this film are obnoxious. I couldn't I could buy it on Amazon. It wouldn't get here in time, and it was a little expensive. Someone uploaded it to YouTube in full, and I watched it there because there's no way to get it.
That's right.
I also did.
Shout out Nick Cage. Thank you, Nick.
Word.
I was gonna say my last thing is like I love like the early 2000s aspect of movies where they just put all the credits in the beginning of a movie and it takes like 10 minutes to actually start.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. I think you could have more fun with it that way. Like I know the old Spider-Man movies were like that, like Sam Raimi's and everything like that. I miss that. It feels like you put more care into the people who actually worked on the film. Like you care about them more rather than just like, let's get through this really quick. Like I just saw something really quick. I saw something where Interstellar like was too long. Like the film reel was actually too long for what they could do with 70mm back then. So they like abbreviated the credits. That way they could fit the movie on the actual film reel, if that makes sense.
Oh wow.
Digitally, Interstellar is longer than it was physically, because they actually were able to show everyone's names in the credits where they weren't actually able to do that on actual film.
Not like Amazon, who abridged It's a Wonderful Life by cutting out the entire point of the movie.
Oh. Uh-oh.
Yeah, I saw that, Harry. It's silly.
Davis makes a video. He just says it, and it's like, this is silly, end video.
You guys want to get into Nosferatu?
Yeah, let's do it.
Absolutely. It's here. I guess this is Egger's passion project that he's been working on for a long time. Dan, you talked about it, but originally, I mean, he's said the exact same thing on every single press junket that I believe like at 9 years old, he, I think, saw the image of Nosferatu, and then he, on the cover of a VHS, no, he saw the image of Nosferatu, didn't know what it was about, told his parents, got the VHS tape, watched the VHS tape, became obsessed, and then in high school with one of his really close friends, I believe her name is Ashley, like did a stage production of this. Like they all wore black and white, and there was a local theater orchestrator there, someone who ran a local theater company, who basically saw it and like, hey, you should put on the show in our theater, kind of a thing. And just having that recognition is what made Eggers want to do, to be a director in the first place. But yeah, originally this was supposed to come out right after The Witch. And I think that's when Anya Taylor-Joy was cast in the Lily Rose Depp role. I'm not sure when Harry Styles was originally cast for the Nicholas Hoult role. I saw that Bill Skarsgård was originally maybe going to be cast in the Nicholas Hoult role as well. But I don't know what happened with that. Maybe it was the copyright, like you were saying, Dan, became available in 2019, public domain. But he's gone on record saying that he shouldn't have made it back then because he just wasn't there. And then especially after, I think he said, after I directed The Lighthouse, I knew that I knew how to direct a movie. Like I could prove to anybody that fact. But yeah, here it is. And I don't think it disappointed. Like this movie's making incredible money, which I'm really happy about. But I'm curious I don't know. We talked about it. I think this is obviously a horror movie, but it seems mainstream, right? It is an IP. Hate using that word, but it's true. But I think that obviously The Witch wasn't, The Lighthouse wasn't, but Northman wasn't. This is such an Eggers film, and Eggers' style does not fit into a mainstream horror movie, if that makes sense. So I feel like so many people went into this expecting jump scares, and so you said that in your review, Harry, and there is some. There is a little.
There are one or two, but it's not
Yes.
like it's not like a standard horror movie where there is a
No,
jump
like the
scare
music
all the
builds up and
time.
everything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
But yeah, I'm curious what everyone's reception is going to be that isn't like in the deep lore when it comes to Eggers or when it comes to Nosferatu, who's just trying to go and look for a fun horror movie to watch on Christmas Day. Because my theater, when I walked out of this, it felt awkward. Everyone's like, okay, like that was it kind of a thing. And I saw someone have a weird discussion about media literacy, like people maybe not getting what the point of the movie was. And I think that's really interesting because was this movie about Nosferatu? No, it was about Ellen and what Ellen went through.
Yeah, it's funny because there was someone in my comment section on TikTok saying this is basically just a rehash of Coppola's Dracula, like beat for beat. And I was like, it's not though, because what Eggers has done here is bring gothic horror to the mainstream. And gothic horror is a very specific kind of horror. It follows a very specific kind of narrative style. The type of horror it is very different from mainstream horror, and I think this is why it divided a lot of the horror community on TikTok and social media, is because I heard so many people saying it was boring. It's boring because you are expecting blood and gore and jump scares every 2 seconds to keep you interested, as opposed to performances and production design and just the permeating sense of dread that runs through this film. I said in my review, like this, it's not something that's going to scare you right away, but you are going to sit with this and you are going to feel queasy about it afterwards. And I'm still thinking about it because of just like everything that went on through this film, through the story, through the performances, Lily Rose Depp's acting in this, and conveying the emotions of frustration and having these issues and wanting to be heard and not being heard. There's so much going on in this film that I think people missed entirely.
I think boring is not a critique of him. Like
if you're it's just the same as boring, this wasn't scary. Like it's meaningless.
Like it doesn't help any. Like I just think it's ridiculous. Chuck sent me a video last night of some guy saying basically the movie's dog shit. If you liked it, you were paid to promote it, and it's boring. It's just like, you're not saying it. Like, I have actual issues with this movie. I like the movie a lot, but I have specific issues. Like, you can't just be like, oh, it's fucking boring, this is dog shit. But like, that doesn't add anything to the conversation. But I think
I would just ask them, like, what was the movie about? Like, what do you think the movie is about, and why doesn't that interest you?
Yeah,
I don't know if they could give you a clear answer, because I don't know if they understand what the movie was about. I think they think the movie was about Nosferatu, where it wasn't about
Nosferatu. Some fucking complex movie. Like, it's just like
someone said the plot spiraled, toward the end of the movie. It's like the plot never strayed. Like this was always the film.
The best part of the movie too, to me, was the third act. Like the third act was insane, and I feel like if you want things to escalate in violence and blood, like the third act was nuts. You have like Aaron Taylor Johnson like banging his dead wife. You have kids dying. You have, spoiler alert, but you have just all kinds of stuff going on. And I think it was a good payoff to like the rest of the film. I don't know. I just think there's a lot of non-critiques happening around this movie. But I will
Yeah.
say I think this felt strangely edited to me. I said it was the first thing I felt. I felt that the entire way through. I I almost felt like this was a longer movie where they took out
Hmm.
some bits and pieces here and there. There were some like cuts to me that felt like really abrupt. And that was kind of my main issue with it. I know Harry, you talked about
Yeah, I didn't get that at all.
No, I was going to say you talked about Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Oh God, yeah. It's funny because I made that video after I posted my review because people were asking why did you take half a point off, and I said because of Aaron Taylor Johnson, and a lot of people in the comments were like, well, he was just conveying what men at the time were feeling. And I said I'm not arguing about his
It's
character.
how he conveyed it.
It's how he conveyed it. Anytime he said "capital old boy," it was so cringy. His delivery was awful. It was very high school theater
It felt like he was
program.
playing dress up, which
It really did. It felt like he's in a big boy movie for the first time, and now he has to be a real actor all of a sudden. It was so weird.
and it's like you're surrounded by like Willem Dafoe and like Ralph Ineson and like
Yeah,
it's just like
Guy, why wasn't Ralph Ineson's name on the poster? It really pisses me off. I
he
know
is
he's
so
not.
good.
I know he's not a big name actor. I think he's in this movie more than Willem Dafoe, and I know he's not Willem Dafoe. But even Emma Corrin, they're not in this movie that much. I mean, or they're not that big of a named actor, So it really pisses me off because he's like the other dude. He's like out of the whole main cast on the poster, he is the other guy that just doesn't get recognition, and he's so good. And I love seeing him. He was also in the First Omen for a little bit this year, at the very beginning. I don't know. He's in throughout the entire movie, the First Omen. Bits
It's
and
funny
pieces.
for a long time during the movie, I thought that was Patrick Page because they have very similar voices. That deep, almost Alan Rickman-y kind of voice. Patrick Page, if you saw Spirited, he was Marley. He's a veteran stage actor. He was in Hadestown. He's done a ton of stuff. He was in The Gilded Age on HBO. But I thought that was him for the longest time, and then I saw the credits. It's like, oh, it's Ralph Ineson. Okay, they just had. I just want a movie where the two of them talk to each other. He was fantastic.
Yeah, what I kind of said was I feel like Severs was a nice like straight man for Defoe to play off of.
Yeah.
And like I would love to watch like a buddy comedy of like the two of them just like going around.
That's why I called them a
vampire
Scooby Gang
adventures.
in my review. Like when they're in the coach and they're plotting how to take down the vampire, it was like, all right, here we go. We're off to the races.
Yeah, and I feel like this movie had like sorry, Stone, but just the right amount of like another thing I felt a little mixed about was like the tone. I think this is a really tough balancing act tone wise because there is some really really dark shit, and the way they present Orlok is literally as just like death and the devil and just everything that's terrible. But like a lot of this is really funny, and like the movie kind of knows it's like a little campy and tongue in cheek, and I think Defoe was like doing a nice job with that, and Aaron Taylor Johnson was like kind of going that same direction, but like not well. And then you have like Lily Rose Depp and Holt like playing it more serious, and it's just like it's kind of a weird mix. I could see it not working for some people, but I liked the funny stuff here as well.
Yeah, I think Defoe's choice to play it up almost like he was at a silent film. I think that was a good choice because otherwise it gets very one note, very just like dreadful, bleak, awful. Everything's terrible, and then I think then you veer into boring territory. But then as soon as he comes on screen, and you can see it in the clothing.
He's a shot of life in the movie.
He's a shot of life. He's wearing light browns. He's wearing he's got the gray and everything. Like he's but it's like a light gray. He brightens the scene in both performance and in just the way he looks and acts and everything. I think it was a good choice for him.
So I have one specific critique that I just think was a missed opportunity.
This was also a black comedy, Stone. I'm just
kidding. That's good. Is the fact that I think a lot of people would say maybe their favorite sequence of the film is when is his name Jonathan in this? It's not. They always switch the names. What's Nicholas?
No, it's Thomas. He's Thomas Hutter in this.
Thomas. Okay, it's Hutter. Okay, so is when he gets into Orlok's vicinity. It gets into the carriage,
into the coach.
Not only the shots that are happening, but the way what Eggers does with the filmmaking. It's like time is an illusion. Like it doesn't exist. Like scenes just like mesh together. Like you don't know where necessarily Hutter is, and I think that's really cool. because he is being taken over, like he's losing his mind in a little bit. Orlok has entered, right? He has no control anymore. And I think that's because he's obviously entered his domain. I think a missed opportunity, and like I said, he does some stuff with the editing and also what he does with the camera there, and just also the set designs as well. Like I love how he makes the carriage door kind of. Obviously, he's going into a tiny little carriage, right? But then when Nicholas Hoult is pulled into that, it's as big as a doorway. That's something that really stuck out to me. But I think a missed opportunity was to bring that same techniques to the moments where he was in the actual city at the very end. Like that kind of editing, right? Because now you guys, now the city, the plague is here, right? Orlok is here. You have entered his world. And I think that would have been really interesting to see that exact same style there. That probably would have been way more difficult because obviously that's just two characters. That's one character's experience with him. And there's so many more at the very end. But I thought that would have been, it made the ending even more impactful for me. Like we don't necessarily know what is going on and neither do these characters, kind of a thing. Now, maybe people wouldn't have liked that.
Are you saying like everything goes back to normal once the vampire is vanquished kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. Like you can definitely tell that something is different, not only in the atmosphere of the city, but also the way everything is shot, the way everything is filmed, the way it was put together. Kind of like you knew when Hutter was in Orlok's presence. You knew when he was under his spell. And I think that would have been really cool to carry that out throughout the end of the movie when he gets there.
But I think we get that in the shot of the sunrise over the city. It's the only time we ever see the sun in this film. Even when Hutter sets out on his journey and there's blue sky, it is shrouded in clouds. Like it's never fully sunny. The only time we ever get a change in tone is the very last shot of the film when, again, spoiler alert for those who haven't seen it, the vampire is vanquished. Although I'm not really spoiling anything. It's a 100-year-old movie as well. So like they didn't change anything. But it's the only shot of sunlight in the entire film. And that is how you know, like this evil that has permeated the world is finally gone.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that aspect of it. The whole last sequence was incredible. I think my favorite moment in the movie is the one conversation between Ellen and Orlok in the dark when they're kind of having the back and forth about what's going to happen.
Right.
I thought that was and they're kind of like getting closer and closer to each other. They're both just going like insane in that scene. And I think Lily Rose Depp, like, I think it's one of the best performances of the year, and like it's very physical too. Like the physicality of this is like I don't think we sometimes appreciate that enough. Like everything she's doing with her body is like just as difficult as what she's doing with her face and voice, and like you know what I mean. Like it's really impressive to me.
And there are not a lot of quick cuts in this film. There are a lot of long takes in this movie.
Yeah.
And so she has to go from talking to someone to screaming at her husband, "You've never pleased me, you don't know," all this, to convulsing on the floor. It's not like, all right, cut, now let's set up the shot where she's shaking. Like she has to change on a dime, and it's unbelievable how she does that.
There's one thing I wanted to ask you guys, because I think you guys are a little bit smarter than me. That I talked to my brother. He's like, maybe I need to watch the movie again. There's a sequence where Orlok says, like, "You're not of this world." Like, was he just saying that as in a romantic way to her? Or like he basically, I thought that maybe she was like some type of, like, he's obviously an elevated being. Like, is she in that same way, or is that just some verbiage that he said?
I think because of that opening scene where she bridges that connection between the living world and the undead, and brings that, because she's speaking out to the void of whatever entity will listen to her, come to me, and he's the one who answers the call. I think she has some sort of connection to another plane of existence, another plane of being. I think that might be what he was speaking to there.
Yeah, I think she just kind of probably exists a little like closer to that space, or like she's able to kind of like reach through that like shroud into whatever he exists in. So that's
she
kind of
too
like
is strange and unusual.
Yeah, it's kind of like a gift and a curse. And I think the the foreshadowing of her conversation at the beginning, talking about the dream with she's at the wedding and then it turns out to be death and everyone's dead, and like the foreshadowing of that to the climax of the movie with the plague in the city Um, and that almost kind of serving as like a marriage to death at the end, and both of them losing their lives. It's I thought that was very poignant.
Yeah.
Um, really nicely done.
People got really like, there were some people, I deleted one comment because he was basically accusing me of like, you must love SA and children dying, and all that. I was like, there's this idea that if you enjoyed this movie, you must like all the things that happened in this movie, and it's like, do you realize Orlok's the villain? Like, because we enjoy a movie and we enjoy a performance, we don't support all the things the villain did. I actually found it really distressing, but also sort of brave of Eggers to put in a scene where Orlok just like kills and drops these two kids in the middle of the room, and like, now this is a villain who means business. This is not some sexy vampire you need to be lusting after. The dude is brutal.
That was kind of sick. I mean, I know it's a terrible thing to say, but the big thing why is because there's such a big height difference, because he's so tall and these are such small children that he just drops them. I was like, oh shoot.
I loved the Orlok design. I know some people hated the mustache and everything, but I love that he was hewing closer to the Vlad mythology with that. And I love that, we're so used to this short, gangly, rat-like vampire, and he made him this hulking beast of a person. It was a really interesting design choice, and I loved it because it really set itself apart, this film, from I think what any other remake would have been, which was, let's recreate the Orlok everyone knows, which I think is what Herzog did, and what Willem Dafoe was impersonating Shrek at the time. But like, it was a really great design choice to separate itself from the source material.
100%.
Yeah, in 1979, it's like, if I'm him meeting Orlok, just like beat his ass and run away. Like, just get out of there, get out of the castle.
Yeah.
This Orlok, you're probably not beating his ass. He's a big.
When he grabs the what do you call it, the chisel or whatever, when he tries to Hutter tries to kill him, and he grabs it and then sits up in the coffin, and it's like, holy shit, this guy is insane.
Yeah, the thing is, all these fan edits, like if you would have been, the prosthetics would have been like they were in the previous iterations, it would have just looked like Bill Skarsgård. Like, this guy looks nothing like Bill Skarsgård at all. No. Like, even with Pennywise, you can kind of see him underneath there. This, not at all. And obviously him being in the dark for most of it helps out, but even at the very end there, nope, don't know who that guy is.
I loved how, in the original, it's Nosferatu who drives or Orlok who drives the coach to bring Hutter into the castle. In this, the coach drives itself under Orlok's will. And I just love that he is shrouded in darkness for almost the entire film. I said in my review, he takes the Jaws approach to directing this, where we don't see the monster until the very, very end. Yeah. And he's out of focus. He's shrouded in darkness. We get glimpses here and there, but we never get a full picture. And I think that adds to the scariness of him.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the best vocal performance of the year. Like, he's doing with his voice,
he trained with an opera singer to get there. Like, I was watching an interview with him. He's like, and I was like I would record myself and listen back, and find a place where that sat in my chest or in my throat, where I could do it for long periods of time. And then I'd ask myself, why am I tight right here? Why am I not able to get the words out the way I should be? Like, there was a lot of thought and method into this.
And I would bet money he did some damage to his voice making this movie. So, like, respect to him, because that does take a toll. I also just quickly wanted to say, I think, like, Nicholas Hoult, I like him a lot as an actor. I think he's good here. I don't think he's, like, going crazy, but I think he's really good. I think the best thing about the performance is, like, how afraid he is and how he's able to convey that fear. I think this is a little bit more likable take on Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's a little more, and I said in my review, I enjoyed this. And when I try to promote the podcast, I want to talk about, like, this is a feminist movie.
Yeah,
straight 100%. Up, just pure feminism, and in a good way that makes sense. And I think every single man character is a different sort of microcosm of, like, different ways to interact with women that are not the best. But I did like that once Thomas has the experience with Orlok, he is, like, changed, right? And he's able to, like, connect more with her, and, like, they have that kind of shared bond and experience. And I bought their connection, and, like, their love way more after that, and I enjoyed that, and I thought it makes the end that much more tragic. So,
And I think as a panel of 4, now 3 men, we are perfectly suited to discuss the feminism of
yes,
Nosferatu.
yes, of
Well,
course.
it's funny. It's funny because just think about the fact like people, this is not what people wanted out of the movie. This is the only movie that we're talking about today where Nosferatu, the vampire Dracula, is straight up, maybe, Bram Stoker's a little bit. He is straight up the villain. Like he
Right.
is awful in this. Like
He-
there's no redeeming
his
qualities.
only
There's not like,
goal-
oh, I live a life of loneliness. I want this girl. And this girl is
Yeah.
mine
And not
because
just
of what
that,
she did.
his only goal is to survive, to feed. Like, yes, he wants Ellen, but his only goal in this is to get to Germany to get more bodies. That's all he wants. He is an animal just looking for his next meal.
Looks like Dan's animal is looking for its next meal.
Yeah.
Dan's holding his dog in his lap. Harry, you already gave us some good recommendations, at least for me to watch after, the original Nosferatu. Any other recommendations you would give to our audience? One film out of the many, many, many that you have seen that would be the film you would recommend.
National Treasure. No, I'm just kidding. I would say along these lines. Oh God, you want gothic horror? There was, Crimson Peak is a great one. Dan mentioned earlier. I would also say there was the Daniel Radcliffe film about the ghost. So The Woman in the Window, I think, something like that.
I think that's what it is.
That wasn't bad. It's tough. I'm not super familiar with gothic horror.
It can be anything, Harry. We just do a recommendation at the end of the show.
No,
just
yeah.
a recommendation?
Any movie, literally
recommendation.
anything you want to recommend. Yeah.
All right. Any recommendation?
Yeah.
I will recommend. Well, I've got 2. Lionsgate has a new 50th anniversary edition of The Conversation coming out, starring Gene Hackman. Fantastic spy thriller. And I'd also recommend The Taking of Pelham 123, one of my favorite heist films. Robert Shaw from Jaws is in it.
Not the remake.
Not the remake. No. You want the 70s version. It is. You want New York in the 70s. Walter Matthau's in this film. It is fantastic. So I would go with those 2.
Connor?
I'm gonna go with one that I texted Dan this week that I really want to have a podcast discussion on because it's now maybe my second favorite movie of the year. I'd have to look at it, but I'm gonna do We Live in Time. Keep in mind, Dan, I see your face. I've only seen, I think I'm at like 12 2024 watches, so that is subject to change. But I absolutely loved it. Florence Pugh and Andrew Garfield's chemistry is fantastic in this romantic comedy drama is the best way to say it. You can rent it on YouTube, Apple, Amazon.
Yeah. Sad movie.
Yeah, and I want to have a more long form discussion than our small text chain we had.
Yeah. Stone, do you have one?
Stone would like to recommend the black comedy Schindler's List.
Y'all coming for me. I'll recommend because we talk about Nick Cage a lot and it's horror. I don't think I've recommended this movie, but it's a film called Color Out of Space, which is not a good movie to Dan, even though he's a Nick Cage boy. But I think it's a really interesting story just about this alien entity coming down and just terrorizing this one family and just watching shenanigans happen, but with a lot of colors. I think it's pretty entertaining. Nick Cage is in it, so I guess you're not a fan of Nick Cage, Dan. But
He's the worst.
yeah, for anybody else, I think it was a really entertaining time. I thought it was really good, especially with good music as well. Good score.
In honor of Harry, I watched Double Indemnity this week.
Oh,
which,
nice.
Is a Billy Wilder movie with Barbara Stanwyck and Fred McMurray. Is that?
Yeah.
It's so simple, but it's so damn good, and it just reminded me, like, I don't know. There's so many ways to say with like so much like CGI and this and that, and it's like if you just write a simple, effective story, it's basically about like a life insurance salesman who gets kind of entangled with this woman who's married. She wants a policy for her husband, and kind of everything that happens and what you find out about her and her past and their dynamic, and it's just a good little like mystery thriller sort of.
It's a noir, yeah.
Yeah, noir, and it's just so entertaining, and she's so good in the movie. Like literally, I think it's one of my favorite performances I've seen this year.
Yeah.
So you have to rent it, but it's just like it's so good.
Yeah, Edward G. Robinson is in that. He's fantastic too. Like it's such a great movie.
Yeah, so I think Billy Wilder also did the Apartment, right, Harry?
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's I've only seen those two, but I'd like to watch just everything I can from him. Really enjoyed it. So
Excellent. Yeah, it's a great choice.
There we go. What was also a great choice was having Harry Marks. Let's all go to the lobby on
Look
this
at you,
episode.
you professional.
Yeah, real professional, not knowing what one of our movies was a comedy, but it's all right. But Harry, thanks for being with us today. Like I said, everyone, if you guys like this movie or Nosferatu, just go check out Harry's channel or account wherever. Harry, tell them where to find you because your movie appreciation will just grow exponentially if you just have this man in your life.
I love you, Stone. You can find me on TikTok at Lobby Intros. I'm at YouTube at Lobby Intros. I'm on Instagram at Lobby_intros because some schmuck already had Lobby Intros. So those are the three main places. I don't post a lot on YouTube, and we'll see what happens if the TikTok ban goes through. But for now, TikTok is my main platform.
There you go. It's exciting. Next month, we're kind of doing some interesting things because not a lot of big movies come out in January. So just as a little, sample of what we're doing, or just so everyone knows that they want to listen along with us or follow along with us with the movies. I don't know if you all have seen this, but we're going to talk about the, what's up, Harry?
Oh, real quick, I wanted to do a plug. One last thing. If you're looking to watch the original Nosferatu, check out Mometu, MOMETU.com. It's a free streaming site / app. It's on iOS, Android, Apple TV. I work with them. I do classic film intros for them. Nosferatu is one of the most recent ones I've done. So if you like Turner Classic Movies, you like the introductions before each film, go check them out. I've got a whole section on the app just for me with my introductions and stuff. So go check that out.
I wish I would have thought of that. When Jeremiah was on here, I remember because he had just got done with one of his short films. I remember one of the film recommendations that I had at the end of the episode was his film. I was like, oh, this little movie that I watched called, I think it was Stalemate. Mm-hmm. So should have thought
you
of that.
You did the same thing when we had Raiders on.
Raiders, it's good plug. But yeah, so the Star Wars prequels, what we're talking about next week, which will be really fun with Sean, Modern Mythos. I think he likes Star Wars just a little bit, so that'll be really interesting. Only 3 movies to talk about, which is kind of a relief. We like talking about movies, but sometimes we don't. Yeah, sometimes we don't talk about them as much as we want to. So that'll be fun. But Harry, thanks again for joining Goodwill Podcasting today. Everyone, look forward to our episode next week. Thanks for hanging out. But until then, please go outside, sit on a park bench, touch some grass, call your friends, and we'll see you then. Peace out.
Bye.